Hi, I have no idea how to begin this video, so I might as well start at the end. Bob Lazar, I will donate 5,000 US dollars in your name to a charity of your choice in exchange for a 1-hour interview. After all, a man that tells the truth should not be afraid of going over his story just one more time, right? Now, very important, we got to do this live, okay? No editing, no cutting, just a straightforward 60-minute conversation. Because as you can see, I've gone over your story for many years. I have read every single article. So obviously the best way of doing this will be on a live stream, okay? You choose the platform, I don't care. You choose the date, the time, and we just have a friendly 60-minute conversation, and we allow people to just tune in and see. So you got my email right here. I guess this is going to attract a lot of scammers, so let me just put it this way. I'm not even going to entertain any email that doesn't come from @unitednuclear.com. That's Bob's company, and oh, believe me, it's going to be coming up big time in this video. Now, my final offer, if you were to say 5,000 for charity, that's very nice, but what can old Bobby get a taste? All right, it's a bit pathetic, but if you want, I will give you 2,500 and another 2,500 for charity. No, you're not going to get it all. And again, you've done so many interviews over the years. What's the harm in doing one more interview, except with me this time? Now, I'm so generous, I'm going to be giving you most of the questions I'm going to be asking in this interview. Not all of them. You're going to have to improvise a couple of times, but there's a few people that are going to be coming up quite a lot in this video, so I might as well introduce them right now. We got, obviously, the man, the myth, the legend, Bob.
Hi, I'm Bob Lazar. During late 1988 and early 89, I worked on the propulsion systems of extraterrestrial vehicles for the United States government.
Yeah, that was perfect. In 1989, the guy spent about 6 months working at the S4 site at Area 51, where his job was just to retro-engineer UFOs. That's always been his story. Then there's, of course, George Knapp. He's essentially a crime reporter for this local Nevada TV station. And he's the one that first interviewed Bob Lazar all the way back in 1989, where he brought his story forward. Then there's obviously Jeremy Corbell. He is sort of George Knapp's protege, and he calls himself an independent filmmaker. He wants to weaponize your curiosity. That's kind of his line.
I have a weaponized curiosity. I am dangerous. I want to know the truth.
And he made the Netflix documentary in 2019, which sort of revived Bob's career. And then there's, of course, John Lear. I don't want to be too mean because he's no longer with us, passed away recently. The thing is, well, he called himself the godfather of conspiracy, and just this typical guy who spends 50 years telling you all these crazy stories. As for actual proof, no, not much of that. But yeah, again, I don't want to be too mean. As you can see, there's a certain degree of endogamy to these four men. They've always been working together to keep the flame of Bob's story alive. That was a weird way of saying it, but yeah. And they've all made quite a lot of money, to be honest. But you know what? Enough with this. Let's get to the questions. So, the first one, I think, is a pretty reasonable one, which is, so you spent 6 months working on retro-engineering UFOs for the US government, right? Now, the first question can only be, how did you get that job? Can't imagine it was through LinkedIn, right?
Some time went by and they called me back in. They said there was a senior staff physicist that was leaving this organization, and they basically interviewed me for that job.
Well, that was a pretty solid answer, actually. I mean, it makes sense, Senior staff physicist announced they were leaving the organization, and somebody else had to come in and replace them. Circle of life. It's a beautiful thing. Now, when asked that exact same question a year later...
Allegedly, obviously, I didn't see this, and I don't know it to be fact, but this is what I was told, that I was hired to replace one of a couple people that were killed while working on one of the reactors from one of the crafts. Apparently, they, for whatever reason, cut open an operating reactor, and the device exploded, killing both of them. The scientists that were killed there, allegedly the detonation from the explosion was fairly large. It would have rivaled a small tactical nuke.
That sounds completely different, though. What? Wait, wasn't it? No, somebody announced they were leaving the research group. And then it becomes, oh, no, actually, what I meant is they died in a horrific nuclear explosion. What? Okay, right now it's kind of tied 1-1. Can we get a tiebreaker here? So when asked the exact same question on the Joe Rogan Experience,
I was replacing somebody that Barry worked with prior to me. And I think there was some horrific accident that I didn't have a whole lot of information on, but, Barry alluded to that.
A horrific accident, like where someone died, or?
Yeah, where somebody died.
Because they were trying to tamper with things or figure out how something worked?
Yeah, the reactor in particular.
But yet he let you touch it.
Yeah, I think what they were trying to do was cut into one.
Oh,
now,
Jesus.
they had more than one there, and that was supposedly there was an unannounced nuclear test, and that's what it was. At the time, remember, they were still doing underground nuclear tests at the test site. But from what I understand, according to Barry, there was an attempt made. Now, this must have been a pretty desperate attempt because it's not a very scientific process to analyze something that way. But it looked like they used a plasma cutter or something like that to cut into an operating reactor.
All right. Well, I guess that settles it. Still, I have to wonder, why did you ever give us the other explanation, the mundane explanation? So, also, I do have some questions about this version. So genius scientist, right? Best in the business. And then they decided, here we've got this reactor that creates anti-gravity, and they didn't have anything better to do than to grab a plasma cutter and cut straight into it. I don't know, man. Those guys sounded kind of dumb. You know what they say? Darwin smiles when idiots die. But still, I just don't get it. So this was an explosion the size of a nuke in an underground air base, and only 2 people died? That's a bit weird. So anyway, now that we have completely cleared that one up, let's go on to the next question, which is obviously, where did these UFOs come from?
This technology that you've learned about thus far was brought here by some alien beings from the Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 star system. These stars are located in the constellation of Reticulum, which can only be seen from the southern hemisphere. Zeta Reticuli is a binary star system, which means it has 2 stars, and is located approximately 30 light years from Earth. These beings are from Reticulum 4, which is the 4th planet out from Zeta Reticuli 2.
Good. That is a very solid answer. I have no way of verifying this myself, but yeah, you sounded quite confident, so yeah, CR4, the 4th planet out in the Zeta Reticuli star system. Now, as you would expect, when asked that exact same question.
So there was some paperwork that indicated that this was from the Zeta Reticuli star system. Now, how they obtained that, I haven't the slightest idea. But it wasn't just from the Zeta Reticuli star system. It was what they called ZR3. So it was a 3rd planet in that star system.
Sorry, my short-term memory isn't so good anymore for some reason. Can we get those 2 back to back?
These beings are from Reticulum 4, which is the 4th planet out from Zeta Reticuli 2.
What they called ZR3. So it was a 3rd planet in that star system.
So which is it? Seriously, which is it? Now, I know a lot of you are going to be like, oh man, you're just nitpicking. He was off by 1. Well, that's kind of the thing. I mean, if I come across this guy who tells me I'm a huge expert on World War II, I know all about it, all the battles, all the way from 1939 to 1944. I mean, yeah, technically you're off by 1, but what does that really do for your credibility? But obviously, I was kind of burying the lead here. There's a way better part, which is, yes, Zeta Reticuli exists. You can see it from the southern hemisphere, by the way. And yes, it's a binary system. Think of it like our solar system, except with 2 suns. There's just one tiny little detail here, which is the Zeta Reticuli star system doesn't have planets. All right? It's got 2 stars, 2 suns, if you want to call it that, but it doesn't have planets. People have been looking for those planets for many years, from in Australia, Argentina. Again, it's only visible from the southern hemisphere, but no. So it really doesn't matter if it was CR3 or CR4, because those planets simply don't exist. Seriously, if you want, stop this video right now, ask your favorite AI chatbot thing, and it will tell you, yeah, no, they don't exist. So, Bob, we're kind of in trouble here already. Now, for some of you old-timers, this whole Zeta Reticuli system thing might remind you of the Barney and Betty story. No, not them. These ones. So this is actually one of the most famous alien abduction cases of all times. It was in 1961. They were driving back from a vacation in Canada when they saw a bright light in the sky, and obviously, as you would expect, they were abducted by aliens. And you're not gonna believe it. These aliens also came from the Zeta Reticuli star system. There's this whole big book about their story. I think the title pretty much gives it away. And yeah, they talked about it for decades, including some very detailed diagrams. Now, let's hear Betty's story.
Where we were given, as the lead, as I call him, gave us testing. There were 11 beings, and for purposes of identification, I called one the leader, because he seemed to be in charge of the project of doing this testing, and he was the only one who spoke English. Then there was the examiner who did the testing, and then there were 9 others we called crew members. They stayed outside the room in the corridor. Our examinations were very much similar in that with both Barney and I, they checked our eyes, ears, nose, throat.
Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Well, wasn't that lucky, you know? The leader spoke English, which is great, you know? Because the theory that's always been floating around is that if we ever come into contact with an alien civilization, our method of communication would be through mathematics, which at first appears to make sense because it's like the universal truth. But then you start thinking about it, it's like, wait, how do you convey the meaning of freedom through mathematics? Like, is that impossible? Like, how do you explain to them what dignity means using a graph? All right, that wasn't the best example, but still, isn't it lucky that the leader spoke English? No, it wasn't a matter of luck. You see, while the others were wasting their time with video games and girly magazines, he was studying English, which is why he's now the leader. See? And you might be surprised to hear that she kind of, Betty, because Barney passed away a couple of years after this, but Betty, she kind of became a lolcow. There was this one UFO conference in New York in 1980, and she started showing them some weird paintings, and, you know, they essentially laughed her out of the room. Yeah. There was also this one interview.
Did you stay in the car?
No. Actually, when I saw them coming up, I sensed danger. I opened the car door, and I was going to get out and try and run and hide in the woods.
Okay.
But I didn't make it. I just got the door open, just started to get out, and they were standing right there in the doorway blocking my way.
Huh. Oh, dear.
Oh, dear. My comment on all this monkey business is, I love 80s girls. I don't know, there's just something about them, the hair, I don't know what it was, but yeah. 80s girls are right in my book. Yeah, and this whole story, again, this was one of the biggest alien abduction cases that the world has ever heard of. Proof? Not so much. But it did get turned into a TV movie in '75. And the clip you're about to see is just not good.
But he was safe. And oh, that's
Yeah, sorry. I made that clip like 5 years ago, and I thought it would be funny, but now I look at it and it's just annoying, so I cut it a little short. Anyway, what they're showing here in the film is how, by the way, if you recognize him, yes, that is James Earl Jones, just a lovely fella, rest in peace. And what they're showing there is how they underwent hypnosis in order to retrieve some suppressed memories or whatever, which is also something that Bob Lazar did.
You did hypnosis to try to recall details from your employment and from the physics
Right.
of what you learned. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, with Lane Keck.
Okay. And did you recall anything?
Yeah, I did. I mean, specifics, things you might have missed. I basically wanted to try everything I could to prove what I was saying.
Yeah, there's a certain common thread between Bob Lazar's story and this TV movie from 1975. And obviously, if we're going to talk about movies, mentioning Set of Reticuли, it would be quite silly for me not to mention one of the probably 3 biggest alien movies of all times, which is the one called Alien from 1979. Remember? Sigourney Weaver, full bush. Well, you'll never guess where that alien was from.
Keep trying.
Calling Antarctica Traffic Control. Do you read me, Antarctica? Over. This is
I found it.
towing vehicle
Just short as 82 reticuli.
Registration.
Yeah, it's quite the coincidence, right? A lot of the single parts to Bob's story is stuff that was in movies when he was a teen. So, anyway, enough of all that. Here's another reasonable question, which is simply, what was the spacecraft like? And he only worked on one of them, right? Which he nicknamed the sports model. By the way, Bob, remember how he said, I'm going to give you most of the questions already? There will be a few where you will have to improvise. Such as, for example, you say that you've always claimed that that was the nickname you gave it. I'm sure it had an official name, right? That the other scientists and engineers worked with. Can you tell me that name? And I realized, I also gave you this question ahead of time, but believe me, there will be a few. Anyway, back to the program. What was that spacecraft like?
This particular disc appeared to be in excellent condition, and because of its sleek appearance, I nicknamed it the Sport Model. The Sport Model is about 16 feet tall and 40 feet in diameter.
That is a perfect answer. 40 feet. That's 12.1 meters for you metric system enjoyers. And by now you're probably catching on, and, I'm about to put a clip where he says something completely different. Well, no.
The lower level of the craft, the floor itself is hexagonal, little hexagonal squares, and the hatch, or if you want to call it a hatch, the access way to get in there.
See, again, 40. And now we even got a nice little diagram showing us it's 40 feet in diameter. It's settled. And you know what's going to happen now, right?
But you have to realize this craft was about 52 feet in diameter. I don't know exactly how much it weighed, but it weighed a lot.
Whoa! And now somehow they changed. I don't know. Maybe because they're made of metal or something, so they expand or contract depending on the temperature. Now it's 52 feet. Interesting. Now, what did you tell Larry King?
I think it was about 52 feet in diameter.
The funny thing about Bob is you can ask him the same question, and he'll just give you different answers every single time. And by now you're probably thinking, this cannot possibly get worse.
As astonishing as it may seem, Bob Lazar claims that the United States government is in possession of alien spacecraft. One of them, nicknamed the Sport Model, measures 52.8 feet in diameter.
Did you catch that? It wasn't easy to see. So the narrator clearly says 52.8 feet. Very precise, right? Now, the diagram we're being shown, let's zoom in a little, it says 40. Now, I realize image quality isn't that great right there. That is from this diagram that I found elsewhere, except he added the little alien dude for some reason. I don't know why. And if we zoom in there, it clearly says 40. So you've got the narrator saying 52.8 while looking at a diagram that says 40. I don't know, man. Can we just get a reasonable answer at some point? And if you're thinking now, okay, this can't possibly get any worse. Oh, it can.
Did you knowingly lie when you said that you had actually seen anti-gravity propulsion in operation?
No.
Did you knowingly lie when you said you had seen an antimatter reactor?
No.
Did you knowingly lie when you said that you actually saw a 30-odd foot gravity-powered flying disc?
No.
And you see now it's 30-odd foot, right? We know this is the truth because, as you can see, he was doing a lie detector test during this, so that must be the truth. Yeah, there's some deep lore about the whole polygraph test thing that Bob Lazar's fans call them Bob Leavers, if you want, though you probably shouldn't. They claim he passed 4 lie detector tests. Now, the problem with that is, as soon as you start researching it just a bit, you'll see, as even George Knapp admits, the first 2, he didn't pass them, he was branded a liar. The third one, the results came back inconclusive. And finally, it was on the 4th one that the polygraph expert said, I think he's telling the truth.
We started the first test, and it went exactly the way I thought it might. He was not doing well. He was reacting to the relevant questions more than he was to the control type of questions, which is indicative of a person who is deceptive, because it's showing an emotion that he does not feel comfortable with his answers. These questions bother him.
And as far as I know, that's how it goes with lie detector tests, right? You can fail as many of them as you want, and you just have to pass one, and then it's all good, right? So, fans of Bob Lazar, I really just want to know how you explain this one away, right? I mean, it's a very simple question. What was the size of that UFO, right? Because it was round. We're talking about diameter. And I just really want to know, how do you explain this one? I've just shown you a bunch of clips where sometimes it's 40 feet, then it's 52, 52.8, then it becomes 30. What explains this? Seriously, you got the possibility to comment? Just explain this one to me, because I'm not fucking getting it. And now surely you think, okay, we've seen the worst of this, but no. Somehow it gets even worse. All right, so check this out. You're going to have to pay attention here because it's really difficult to understand what he's saying. I mean, this is just Bob Lazar on the Joe Rogan Experience. He's talking in English. It should be simple to understand, but it's actually not. So pay attention as you hear this.
What is the roughly the size of this thing?
It's I don't remember from being there, but after all this stuff was over, I had John Andrews, a guy from the Testers Model Corporation, and we sat down and tried to figure out from what I saw and known sizes of things, and we came up with 52 feet in diameter.
All right, here, I just have to admit it, he got me with that. Because you see, that whole Testers Model Corporation, for some reason I thought it somehow had to do with like the ISO, International Organization for Standardization. No, it turns out I was hearing completely wrong. It's with an O. Testors Model Corporation. And now you're probably thinking, okay, what the hell is the Testers Model Corporation with an O? It's a toy company. You remember those DIY kits you gotta glue together and paint? That's essentially what they do. They got tanks, aircraft, and apparently Bob's UFO. And by now you're probably saying, okay, that was nice. I learned a new thing today, but what the hell does this have to do with Bob Lazar and whether he worked on UFOs or not? Yeah, sorry, my bad. I should have probably started this with, this is the officially licensed Bob Lazar S4 UFO. See? Testers Model Corporation with an O. And now I can see you're still just as confused and possibly getting a bit annoyed, so let me just be straightforward here. Surprisingly, from his own tale, Bob admits that the 6 months he spent working at the underground airbase, he never found out the size nor the weight of the UFO he was tasked with figuring out how it flew, how it worked. I find that a little weird. Okay, but then how does he know this now? Well, that's very simple. See, when Bob was planning on releasing a toy, he linked up with John Andrews, that's a product development manager at Testers. And how exactly that went, I have no idea. I guess John just started lining up pizza boxes on the ground until Bob was like, yeah, that's about the distance from one side to the other. And that is how he now knows the size of these UFOs. It's never a straightforward explanation with Bob, is it? Because realistically, you would have just expected him to say something like, it was in the briefing I received on day one. Or maybe something like, well, nobody had bothered to look into that, so I bought this really long tape measure, and that's what I did on my first day at the job. But no. The reason Bob can tell you the size of this thing is because 5 years later, he was trying to sell a toy. Very weird. It's always very strange stuff with Bob. And if you think this was weird, wait until question 12. Oh, and one more thing. This is what the UFO looked like, right? Well, see, that kind of reminds me of those famous Billy Myers UFOs. Now, Billy Myers, I could talk about that guy for an hour or two, or I might just leave it at this screenshot. He said he was the seventh prophet sent to Earth to tell us about the Jews. See, how do people listen to all of this? I'm a UFO expert. What the fuck? Anyway, you would expect somebody to grab 1 or 2 photographs of UFOs in their whole life. I'm 41 years old. I've never seen one, but 1 or 2 at most. That wasn't the case with Billy. You see, he showed us hundreds of photographs of UFOs. It was pretty much every single time he stepped out of his home in the Swiss Alps, there would be a UFO. He had at least 900 photographs. And then at some point, unfortunately, his career came to a screeching halt when he showed us these 2 photographs. See, the story was he was abducted by a UFO and they allowed him to take a couple of pictures of the aliens. And boy, those aliens kind of looked like hot 70s women. And it did take a couple of years for people to figure this out, but yeah, those 2 aliens, Asket and Nera, they looked remarkably similar to these singers that Dean Martin had on his show, the Dean Martin Variety Show. And if we see these scenes,
2 friends drifting apart.
Yeah, bro, you did not take that photograph on a UFO. You took a photograph of your fucking television. And can you believe it? Still, Bob's UFO looks exactly like this one. Isn't that amazing? My final conclusion to all of this is, I also love 70s women. Had their own style. Great. Oh, and before I forget, Billy Meyer's ex-wife admitted that all those UFOs he would keep running into, he made those at home. He would essentially weld trash cans together, so yeah.
It looked like, if anyone's familiar with Billy Meyer's sightings, very astonishingly similar to that craft. It was a very sleek, thin-looking...
So yeah, remarkable. The seventh prophet that was sent on this earth, mostly just to take pictures of UFOs, the UFOs he was seeing, they looked exactly like the one that Bob Lazar worked on. Amazing stuff. Oh, and by the way, enough time wasted with this, but Billy Meyer's UFOs, in turn, looked quite a lot like Adamski's UFOs. And Adamski, listen, I don't know anything about this guy. This is straight from ChatGPT. He was a guy that came out in the 50s showing us pics of UFOs. He, in fact, claimed he was once taken to Venus on one of these UFOs. And he landed there, and he said it was like a lush jungle, and with this advanced hominid speed. I don't fucking know. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you didn't land on Venus, because, well, the temperature is 465 degrees Celsius, 870 Fahrenheit, and also atmospheric pressure is 92 times that of Earth. I think you would have just gotten squished like a grape. So I'm just going to risk my credibility and my professional career to tell you, I think that guy was full of shit. Yet, remarkably, the UFOs he was seeing in the 50s, they look like the ones that Billy Myers was seeing in the 70s, and they look exactly like the ones that Bob Lazar totally worked on in 1989. Enough talking about feet and weird solar systems. The next one isn't a question, it's a command. Show us them aliens, dude.
I never saw any aliens walking around there. I never heard anybody saying anything about living aliens, so I don't think that was it.
But they did have a nickname for the aliens.
The kids. The kids.
Oh man, that is disappointing. You know, all this talk, and we're not gonna hear any awesome alien stories, you know? Maybe this was a waste of time. Now, luckily, the beautiful thing here, right, the magic of Bob, if you will, is whenever you ask him a question and you don't like the answer, just ask him the same goddamn question again. He will give you a different answer.
You had the military out there supposedly working with the aliens. Did you ever get an inference from them that it was a positive or a negative situation? In other words, when they brought up, when they were talking about the aliens or whatever, was it a positive or a negative type slant on them?
Well, they really didn't talk about the aliens. The only time I ever heard anybody mention anything about an alien, someone, and I'm just assuming that, someone called it, or called the thing, a gourd. And that was it. I heard it in the middle of a conversation, and they stopped talking when I got up to them, so that was the thing.
Oh, so now we've gone from I never heard about aliens to I only once heard about. Yeah, interesting. This, by the way, was recorded in 93 at the Ultimate UFO Seminar at the Little Ale Inn. Great pun, by the way. Which is this UFO-themed motel in Rachel, Nevada, which is the town closest to Area 51. Anyway, you know there's more coming, right? So let me just shut my mouth and play the clips.
Again, this was a story that was relayed to me, and allegedly what happened in '79, there was some sort of information exchange going on where there were actual live aliens at the facility, and at one particular point there was an area where some security personnel went to enter, and apparently because not the sidearms but the bullets in the sidearms, from what I understand, if they would have entered the area, the bullets would have detonated, and supposedly one of the creatures tried to stop the security personnel from entering the area, and a fight ensued. And the bottom line from the altercation was that the security personnel, I don't remember how many were involved, but were all killed, and they died of head wounds, and that's all that I heard of that story.
Whoop-de-doo! Beautiful. So we just went from I never heard of any living aliens to there was a direct exchange of information with actual live aliens. Dude, what the That sounds fascinating. So there was like a fist fight between like these Delta forces and scientists and them aliens. All right, yeah, good. Yeah. Weird how you never heard any. Okay, that's Now the sad thing here is, he didn't really remember the exact number of people that died that day. So perhaps our friend, the godfather of conspiracy, John Lear, can chime in and tell us what happened. Now, one thing I'm going to have to say: this guy talked kind of slow, so I'm going to be fast forwarding.
Interesting, but then when I read the attack on Dulcie and the attack, the Dulcie story, the fight, what we call the Dulcie War, not a war at all. What happened is they were this is like in the late 70s, I think it was 79. One Gray was giving a class to about 40 U.S. scientists, and it was at Los Alamos or Dulcie, and it was just a class, and our guards, the Delta Force, were advised that they were not allowed to go into a classroom with a Gray or approach a Gray or be anywhere near a Gray with a firearm of any sort. And so, whatever reason, this security guard walked into this instructional class with a weapon, and the Gray killed him instantly. I mean, there was no warning, no nothing, just killed him instantly. Wow. And so, the Delta Force, who were watching it on the monitor, went in force to get, to take revenge on something they had witnessed. And when it was all said and done, there was 66 people killed, and included all the scientists and all the Delta Force. Now,
by the one Gray.
By the one Gray.
All right, there you go. It was 66 people, 40 scientists, and 26 Delta Forces. One of the most amazing things about 1979 is, well, it was one of the few years that the U.S. just wasn't at war with anyone. So how exactly did they explain to the families and whatnot that 26 people, 26 Delta Forces died in one day? Because normally it would be as simple as, they ran into an enemy ambush, their transport plane got shot down. But how exactly did they explain all those deaths? Never mind the 40 scientists that died in one night. I suppose they had families too, but So Bob, when we do this interview, which is definitely going to happen, right? I'm sure you will bring me a bunch of newspaper cutouts where you show how the U.S. Army explained away this stuff. For now, I don't know, I just have a lot of questions, man. All right, so whatever. We've gone from I never heard of no aliens to actually I heard some aliens beat the shit out of some Delta Forces, but can you take me higher?
How specifically did the briefings detail how the aliens manipulated our genetics over the centuries?
It mentioned 65 or 63 corrections or additions to the genetic makeup that finally resulted in, a human creature.
Okay, sure, why not? Why not? So they were modifying our DNA for many years. Yeah, at this point, Bob, what do you have to lose? Just push it to the limit, dude. Can you tell me something even more amazeballs about them aliens?
These beings said that they had been visiting Earth for a long time and presented photographic evidence which they contended was over 10,000 years old. There was an exchange of hardware and information in central Nevada until 1979, at which time there was a conflict which brought the program to an abrupt halt. The beings left, but were to return at a 1623 date, and I don't know what that date is.
I never heard of no living aliens. I did hear they've been coming here for around 10,000 years to genetically modify human beings. And see, I'm going to have to put a stop to that, Bob, because 10,000 years, nowhere near long enough. Actual scientists, I'm going to butcher this word, paleontologists? Yeah, I think that sounds good. Anyway, guys that dig up bones, yeah, these people, they have shown that there's been absolutely no difference, no change how humans from 100,000 years ago and from nowadays look like. So this whole, they changed our DNA over the last 10,000 years. I'm starting not to believe you, Bob.
Alien intervention in the past, extremely long ago, something along the lines of millions of years ago.
And finally the truth comes out. Yeah, so it was 10,000 years ago, a minute ago, which didn't really make much sense, but now, finally, he realized this, and now we're talking about millions of years. Yeah, and clearly this is a man that is telling the truth. All right, and for those of you keeping score at home, I never heard anything about living aliens. Okay, I once heard about a living alien. I heard a rather crazy story about an information exchange with actual live aliens, and then they beat the shit out of some scientists. They have been playing with our DNA to make us humans, and they have been doing so for 10,000 years. Did I say 10,000 years? Oh, silly rabbit. No, they have been coming here for millions of years. And at this point, I can really only ask,
do you think consistency is important?
No.
And now that we have completely cleared all of this up beyond the shadow of a doubt, let's move on to the fifth question. What is element 115? One brief thing, what does element 115 mean? It's just the number of protons, right? So before the global scientific community reaches a consensus on what to call a type of atom, they just call it by its atomic number, as in the number of protons, right? So bromide is 35, barium is 56, and those are pretty much the only two I can tell you right now. Now this is where it gets interesting. There was no element 115 on the periodic table of elements back in 1989. It had never been detected, nor discovered, nor even synthesized. It just didn't exist. And lo and behold, in 2003, element 115 was first discovered. To be more precise, synthesized using a particle accelerator. How that shit works, I don't know. It's like a big ring, and then they just shoot some atoms down there, like at 20% of the speed of light, apparently. And then they just slide in some other atoms. And he talked about element 115 when it technically didn't even exist. So he's got to have known something, right? I mean, maybe some parts of his story aren't particularly true, but he's got to have some sort of insider information, right? And the answer to that question is no, not really. So do you mean it was all just a huge coincidence? Nope, not that either. Now, again, to be brief with this, as you can see, here we have a periodic chart from 1959, when Bob was born. Here we have one from 89, and here we have a current one from 2025. I realized those pictures were not particularly clear, so let's go to Wikipedia, timeline of addition of new elements. And as you can see, new elements are being added to the periodic table all the time. There have been 17 of these in his lifetime, so right now we're not at a point where we're discovering them, it's more about synthesizing them. So what that tells me is, was it absolutely impossible to predict we would have an element with 115 protons? I mean, doesn't seem that hard to understand once you see this chart, right? And if you don't believe me,
I believe the Heavy Ion Research Lab in Darmstadt, Germany, has reached element 112 recently. So 115 isn't that far away.
That's a town in Germany. He's referring to their atomic research lab, GSI Helmholtz-Zentrum für Schwerionenforschung. Yeah, you don't need to memorize that. Just remember Darmstadt, right? And he does make a point of informing us of this.
I think the lab for heavy ion research in Darmstadt, Germany, has pioneered most of the new heavy elements. And, you know, mark my words, they're going to be the guys that synthesize 115.
Huh. See, he's directly admitting that and predicting that someday they would synthesize something like that wasn't really that difficult to imagine. In fact, any physicist back in 89 would have told you exactly the same, right? Now, here comes the bombshell question. When they finally synthesized E115 in 2003, did it show any potential for space travel and anti-gravity? No, obviously not. What it did is what all of these high proton unstable atoms do, they decay. I think it's got a half-life of 0.65 seconds. And here's another thing. So when the global scientific community did settle on a name, they called it Moscovium. And you'll be like, wait, not Darmstadium or something? No, Moscovium, because that's where it was first synthesized. You see, for all this talk about Darmstadt in relation to element 115, it didn't end up happening. Had nothing to do with it, really. It was synthesized in this facility north of Moscow. So, Now, remember his first interview with George Knapp, which was on the 14th of May, 1989. Now, I have a completely random question here. Do you happen to have a copy of the May 89 edition of Scientific American? No? Well, don't worry, I've got one. A lot of very interesting articles that fly way over my head, but then there was this one article that theorized that there could be an island of stability, meaning high proton atoms that could be paradoxically stable. And so this article is written by Peter Armbruster and Gottfried Münzenberg. Yeah, these typical long German names, you know. Peter Armchester, so he's got that whole T-Rex thing going on. And God Peace Coin Mountain. All right, thanks for the German lesson here, Louis, but do you have a point with this? Well, if we turn the page right now, we will see, there you go, element 115. Isotope 291 of element 115. Well, that's quite the coincidence. Remember, this came out 14 days before his first interview. There's just always these big coincidences with Bob. There's always something with the guy, right? Do you remember that word I asked you to memorize a few minutes ago, Darmstadt? Well, you will be surprised to hear. Where did these two long German name dudes work? Well, one of them, he worked at the Atomic Research Lab in Darmstadt. And what about the other one? Yeah, him too. So, I'm sorry, Bob, did you just totally give it away? I mean, as always, it's up to you what you want to believe, but so much talk of Element 115, so much talk about Darmstadt. It ended up being a completely different facility in Russia that did it, and at some point you gotta ask, Bob, did you by any chance just get all of this from an article in a magazine? Because, some people say, no, I find it more likely that he found this out when he was working at a super secret UFO chop shop. But I think I'm gonna lean more towards he saw it in a magazine. And then a minor one, so apparently he said we had 500 pounds of Element 115. Did it come with a craft?
Whether or not it was given to us, I can't answer that question. However, I was told that we have 500 pounds by one of my coworkers. How it was obtained and where exactly it came from, I don't know. Whether it came in one of the crafts or it was separate cargo somewhere. Anyone can speculate, but I was told that was the figure.
Did it come with a craft?
Somehow or another had acquired a stable version. Did they say that the stable version had come with this craft?
Yeah, it absolutely came with the craft, yeah.
Anyway, you know what? Enough of this Element 115. Choose whatever you want to believe. I never want to hear about Element 115 again. So we move on to the sixth question, which is, did you steal some Element 115 from the lab? Sorry, I promise this one's going to be way shorter. So for the longest time, there's been rumors that he may or may not have swiped some Element 115 from the lab, right? He has been asked about this in pretty much every single interview.
You were able to get away with a sample of Element 115. How much did you get away with?
No comment.
No comment, yeah. That's politician speak for yes, but I can't tell you. So, nice. Do we have more?
Everybody knows the story is that you got some Element 115 out of Los Alamos. That's public knowledge. Something you said a while back. Do you think that what happened had to do with that?
Where'd I go in there?
Man, he seems quite consistent on this. This might be the first thing he's consistent about. It's like, no, I don't want to talk about it. He doesn't outright deny it, but, let's not go there. And in fact, Corbell was so interested, he asked him twice in the same Netflix documentary. Now, I can assure you, I in no way edited this clip that you're about to see, okay? This is taken straight from how it appeared in that Netflix documentary.
So here's the deal. Did you ever get a piece of Element 115 out of Los Alamos?
I don't know how much monitoring they do with me. I'm sure it's virtually none.
Jeremy, you clumsy fool. After all these years, Bob was ready to give a long-form explanation, and you messed the whole thing up while editing. You sped up the footage so much, I can't hear anything. Jeremy. And this makes you tonight's biggest loser. Now, in case you're wondering, okay, could you just digitally slow this down so you can actually understand what he's saying? Tried it, doesn't work, so yeah. We were this close to finding out the truth about this, and then young Jeremy over here, he sped up the footage so much we can't understand a word. Good job. No wonder people think your documentary sucks. So this appears to be a rare case where Bob always gives the same explanation. I know, it's unprecedented. But then he wouldn't be our Bob. So if you go back to 1993, Ultimate UFO Seminar, yada, 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 Rachel, Nevada, what was his answer then?
I understand you took some 115 home with you to do some testing on your...
I obtained it, yeah.
Did you document any of your testing?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah, the video, mostly videotape and things like that.
John said it was stolen from you later. Last night he said...
They stole it back.
Stole it back, he said?
Well, there's another level to that, but like I said, right now it's in private hands.
Okay.
See? That wasn't so difficult, dude. Just admit the truth. So we have confirmation he did steal some of it. Okay, interesting. Now, this leads me to two questions, and because I am an idiot, I'm going to focus on the silly one. So this was in 93, where he might potentially still have some FBI agents after him or whatever. And there he had no problem admitting it, right? But then when it comes to 30 years later, now he's like, ooh, I'd better not tell anyone I had stolen some of that. Does this make sense to you? And now, obviously, the more important question, so if we're going to believe what you just said, in the early 90s, you had a little piece of this extraterrestrial material. Wow. So I guess what you did at that moment was you called in all the big news channels in the world, you brought them over, and you said, this proves my entire story is real. And did he do that? Well, no. You'll be surprised to hear. So what he did is he brought it home and he filmed this lame cloud chamber experiment, which was kind of useless in retrospect. Also, they lost the tape.
I'm more convinced than ever that the key to the story is element 115. If you could get to that piece and have it independently analyzed, I think it would prove beyond all question that it came from somewhere else. We didn't make it. And it would go a long way toward establishing the story that was told by Bob Lazar as truth. So I think about that a lot. I think about the cloud chamber experiment. I get a lot of emails from people who say, oh, God, where's this video? You owe it to the world to show this video. Cough it up. And I tell them, look, I've looked for it. I've got all these boxes of crap and stuff and tape and news clippings, and I've looked for it, and I can't find it. But when somebody like you comes and talks to me about the Bob Lazar story, it gets the juices flowing again. You know, I can't help it. I'm human, and right now, I want to go find that tape.
So, check it out. Okay, so George Knapp has the tape that proves it all. Can he just retrieve it? See, unfortunately, he's got all these boxes of crap at his house, and yeah, which is why it took them almost 30 years to find it. Good stuff. Oh, man. I really hope they can find that tape and it is substantial enough to prove the whole thing. Good news. They found it. Somehow not in George Knapp's home, but in Bob Lazar's garage, but it doesn't matter. They found it.
I went through every tape that Bob had in his personal home archive, and one of those tapes on the outside, in tiny, tiny little scribble, said cloud chamber. And lo and behold, there's about just less than a minute of that cloud chamber test on tape. I have it.
People have been so pissed at me over the years I can't find that tape, or they think I'm hiding it on purpose, but I've looked everywhere for it, and if you found it, that's awesome.
I did. Now here's the deal. In typical, Bob Lazar fashion, there's only about a minute of it. However, after all these years, 30 years, we have some footage of it, but it doesn't prove shit because it's recorded over.
I was there the night that they did the cloud chamber test.
And in typical Bob Lazar fashion, it doesn't prove shit. Now, there is a thing that at some point, and it was in this Jeremy Corbell interview I haven't been able to find anymore, but he did specifically say that he taped over it with an episode of The Golden Girls. Yeah. I always knew those Golden Girls were standing in the way of science. And
so then I asked Bob, is there anywhere this could be anywhere else? This is important footage, Bob. And I find it sandwiched between two Golden Girls episodes on some tape he kind of recorded over.
All right, and now let's take a little break. I know this is all extremely information dense. Let's just have a little bit of fun with the next question, which is also not a question. It's just, here's what I'm certainly not doing, right? So what we figured out by now, Bob Lazar, genius physicist, one of the greatest geniuses of all times, but he's just not good with numbers. He is, in fact, really bad with numbers. And I don't know, is there something like dyslexia for numbers? Because it's a different story every single time. Now, here's the insane part. Besides getting it wrong every time, he does seem to have this special fixation with the number 30. Don't ask me to explain this either. I have no idea what goes through his mind. So, for example, Bob, that underground UFO research lab you worked at, it was built right into the mountain to conceal it, right? From satellites and whatnot. Can you tell us what angle was it cut into the mountain?
The S4 installation is built into the mountain, and the 9 hangar doors are angled at about 60 degrees.
Thank you, 60 degrees. And I'm going to ask you the same question again, and now...
It's a very interesting building. It's got a slope of probably about 30 degrees, which are hangar doors. And
he likes the number 30. I don't know why. There's just something about it. I mean, some might say, oh, dude, you're nitpicking. Okay, so he got one thing wrong. I don't know, man. I would assume the one guy in the room who can just tell the difference between 30 and 60 degrees would be the genius physicist, but apparently not. Now, that whole embarrassing disaster about the size of the UFO, 4052, and...
saw a 30-odd foot gravity-powered flying disc.
He loves that number. I don't know. All right, and now let's talk very briefly about a corona discharge. I realize that sentence might have a completely different meaning after 2020, but see, the thing is, when Bob was seeing these UFO test flights, which he totally did, there was this corona discharge under the UFO after it was taking off. Yes, this is actually a real thing. It looks like this. There's like a hissing sound and a bluish color. It's just what happens when there's like a high voltage interacting with the atmosphere or something. I don't know. Now, I'm very sorry, we're going to have to get into feed again. So, Bob has always said as the UFO took off, that little corona discharge dissipated. Okay, good. At what height?
Quietly or silently?
Well, quietly, because it
make some sort of a noise?
It produced a little corona discharge from the bottom. A corona discharge is kind of a high voltage brush, little bluish glow discharge. As it was lifting off the ground, you can hear a slight hiss sound. Now, as soon as it cleared the ground by about 5 or 10 feet, maybe even less than that, the hissing stopped and the blue glow disappeared.
5 or 10 feet or maybe less. Good.
Slowly lifted off the ground. It had some purple-blue corona discharge on the bottom. Not very bright, but it was noticeable, like you would see around high-voltage systems or Tesla coils. That produced a hiss, and as it lifted about 4 or 5 feet off the ground, that dissipated, and it just stood there motionless in the air, which was incredibly impressive.
Okay, 5 or 10 or less. Why would you say 5 or 10 or less? But
As it rose to about 20 or 30 feet, the sound dissipated and it was completely silent and hung.
See how we're slowly inching towards. Now it's already 20 to 30, and it's almost. Can we have it, Bob?
The craft lifted off the ground, virtually noiseless, other than a small corona discharge on the bottom of the craft, indicating the presence of high voltage. That dissipated at about 30 feet, and it stood there completely silently.
And we're finally back at 30. Yeah, I don't know. It's just something about the guy. And, this makes me think 2 things of you, Bob. First, do you remember that video of that beaver that just instinctively starts building a dam from toys and plushies? Because that's just what's hard-coded into his DNA, right? Well, Bob is much like that beaver, except for the number 30, and I cannot explain it either. Also, it makes me think another thing. I'm sorry, there's no easy way of saying this. Bob, do you realize all of this just makes you come across like a total dumbass? Because I'm sorry, what am I supposed to say? Like, imagine you're sitting there at a park having a beer with a friend and you say, how far away do you think that tree is? And then he's like, oh, 4 or 5 feet. Oh, 5 or 10 or less. Actually, it's 20 to 30. I am pretty sure it's 30. It just makes you come across like a dumbass. I'm sorry, but it is what it is. Now, all of this was just a total waste of time. I mean, it is real, but I just wanted to work up to the following. And see, this is the one where you realize it might be something pathological. I mean, the fact that Bob Lazar is not normal, easy enough to figure out, but I think there's like actually something wrong with the man. Because check this one out. So, as you can verify, the guy was born in 1959. Okay. And he worked on those UFOs in early 89. So, how old was he at that point? Right? You don't really need a calculator for this. So it seems like this would be a great opportunity for Bob to give us his favorite number, because everything always ends up being 30 with a guy. So I'm almost afraid to ask, Bob, how old were you when you worked on them UFOs?
This is awesome.
How old were you at the time?
I was in my 20s.
Yeah, so you're probably...
Is he just laughing at us by this point? Dude, you were born in 59. How old were you in 89? Oh, I was in my 20s. Dude, are you for real? But no, the 20s is a long time. I mean, technically, I was 29 years old and 364 days. No, seriously, bro, how old were you?
I do regret, at this point, bringing anything forward. Look, at the time, I'm in my early 20s. You know what? This is a crime against the American people.
Pero que hijo de puta! Dude, are you physically incapable of not lying about everything all the fucking time? You were born January 4th, 59. How old were you in 89? I was in my early 20s. Dude, do I have a calculator? Maybe I'm wrong about this. What the fuck? This guy has been lying about everything for 36 years, and it had to be some random guy from Spain to finally lay it out and say, dude, nothing you've ever said is real. Why do you lie about trivial shit? I'm gonna need a break. What's next? Some bullshit. All right, let's just move on, because this is getting kind of sad, Bob. All right, now, just another short one. Let's keep it light. So, number 8. Can you tell me more about the magical hand scanner? So apparently there was a security measure when you wanted to enter the base, and Bob, take it from here.
The interesting thing is when you walk into the facility, or even to leave, they have a hand reader. I was told that it has to do something where it measures the bright light measures the bones in your finger. They're unique to each person. It sounds like something out of a TV show, but it's exactly the way it is.
Man, I looked for that kind of thing all over the internet, never found anything. And then all of a sudden this article comes out and it says that at the Nellis Range, they were talking about the stealth program, there was indeed this hand scanner that was used in these secret programs, and they just admitted or announced it publicly. And there were some photos, and I just was interested. And so
I never thought I'd see one of these again.
Yeah, great acting. So I'm glad you were able to see that magical hand scanner thingy after all these years. Apparently, it took Jeremy Corbell months to find it. And then on the Joe Rogan Experience,
when you put your hands on there, the light would turn on and your badge would pop out.
There's it right there.
Oh, there it is. That's it. And I tried to describe this to people, and they said, that is the most ridiculous thing we've ever heard.
So it took Jeremy months to find it, and young Jamie found it in 10 seconds doing a Google search. That's no bueno. Anyway, this is ringing a bell, right? Like, I've seen this, the whole hand thing with a badge. I think I've seen this in a film from 1977. What was the name again?
Like the Steven Spielberg Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Close. It was Third Kind. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Here you go.
Here are the patterns. We just received 2 15-minute broadcasts. Are these non-random signals? 104 rapid pulses. After a 5-second interval, 40 pulses. Another 5-second break and 30 pulses. 60 seconds of silence and then an entirely new set.
So that's it? A huge part of this man's story is just stuff he saw in movies? Wait, how do you come back from that? No, this was a super secret tech. Nobody had ever heard about it. It had been in a film 12 years before that, but what do you say at this point? It wasn't particularly new tech either, as the readers of the Palm Beach Post-Times know. This had been around since the early 70s. So now let's just move on to question number 9, which is, why don't you want to talk about it? Yes, as surprising as it may sound, the guy hates doing interviews. And he has informed us of this fact in about 80 or 90 interviews, which he hates doing. And that's kind of unfair, because this is a guy who was let in on the biggest secret in the history of humanity. He chose to come out with it, and then all of a sudden it's like, nah, I don't want to talk about it. Kind of lame.
I hate fucking attention. I don't like being on shows. I just want to kind of hide in the corner and do my own thing. So I got enough hugs when I was a kid, okay? I don't need any attention. So,
bro, you owe it to the world to tell them your totally real, mind-bending story about the UFOs, man. But yeah, somehow this is the only consistent part of his entire life, I would say. Here we have him all the way back in 1989.
Lazar says he has no intention of going on any UFO lecture circuit. He's not looking to do any additional interviews. In fact, he wasn't too crazy about doing this one.
As you can see, he never changed his story. Now, notice, he said, I don't want to do any more interviews, but then he did make this crappy, self-produced documentary, The Lazar Tapes and Excerpts from the Government Bible. That's a bunch of nonsense. And then he was interviewed again by Dan Housel. I have no idea who that is. And then how about this one on the History Channel?
I have people that can verify everything. No ifs, ands, or buts. And I can't wait to prove it all.
You see, that documentary is from the mid-90s. So you've now had 3 decades to bring out these people that could prove everything with their butts. And what did we get? Another interview.
That rumor stems from the experience of Bob Lazar, who claims he worked at an ultra-secret division of Area 51 called S4.
And as you would expect, obviously another one on the Sci-Fi Channel.
And the device exploded, killing both of them.
And then another one with Paul McKenna. I have no idea who that is. And then there's the one with herpes. And then 3 decades later, he got together with all his friends, Corbell and Knapp, to make yet another documentary, this one for Netflix.
He has rarely made himself available. He doesn't talk about it.
Big questions, disturbing answers, and Bob has never been comfortable in talking about it, never.
And that turned out to be a strategic mistake for him. Because you see, by 2019, 3 decades into the story, his popularity was waning. I can't imagine too many people being interested anymore. And then they released that documentary on Netflix. And then all of a sudden, people were interested again. And he was called to do many more interviews, which he hates. And then apparently he was forced, against his will, to go on the biggest podcast in the world, the Joe Rogan Experience.
Appreciate it. I understand that you've told the story many, many times. You've been grilled many, many times, and it's very stressful.
He didn't want to go public. He's a reluctant UFO messiah. George Knapp pulled him and said, this is going to help you to protect yourself.
And it's not only a matter of him not liking interviews. He didn't want to be part of the UFO lecture circle either, as we saw here.
There's someone looking inside. It's there then gone. Maybe please.
Which, by the way, I do have to say, the story that he told that time is so different from now that, yeah, I think he probably had a few drinks and did not work. And as you would expect, the man that hates to go on these UFO conferences, he went on this one in Denmark.
You know, quite frankly, I prefer people don't believe it because then I don't get asked questions and don't get bothered at all.
Okay, I'm starting to think we could have saved a lot of time if I had just shown you his IMDb page. The thing is, that wouldn't cover it all either, because he was also forced, against his will, to do interviews on the radio. He was on Coast to Coast AM more times than I can list.
To finally bring his unique story to the screen, and this is a man who does not do interviews. He's even worse than I am. I mean, he's very shy.
Here's one that a lot of people don't know. So he got together with his friends John Lear and Gene Huff, and they actually paid money to rent out a slot on this local Nevada radio station for a show called UFO Line. He did all of that just to tell us.
Good evening and welcome to UFO Line. I'm Gene Huff here with Bob Lazar. Bob, are you set for the show?
No. In fact, this is the last place I want to be tonight.
That's the spirit.
And he did all of that just to tell us that he really hates talking about this. And you better believe, our boy was going international. See, here we have him in a documentary with a very jolly British fella.
Have UFOs crashed on Earth? Have we made alien contact? Is the US government covering up a massive UFO conspiracy?
And believe me, he truly was very jolly.
That the United States government is still investigating UFOs. The question is, who's in charge?
I worked on UFOs, do you know what I mean? Sorry for that. But yeah, the guy then went on to Italian television.
Sembrava tutto molto militare, non un ambiente scientifico. C'erano molti controlli.
Molti controlli. Yeah, once you've been to the land of spaghetti, you might as well go to the land of noodles. I have no idea why I just said that.
One time I was
Okay, maybe I'm being a little unfair, because this is clearly the same Italian interview, just overdubbed to Japanese, so can't blame him for people taking his story, right? By the way, speaking of Nippon TV, so there's this very funny story. This was all researched by Tom Mahood. Check out his page on otherhand.org. So, the Tokyo affair. Nippon TV wanted to interview him, biggest TV station in Japan, and so they told him, look, we got you plane tickets, we'll pay for the hotel, for everything, just come on over, we want to hear your story. People are fascinated by it. And so he immediately goes like, but you see, for reasons I can't quite explain, it's better if I get my own plane tickets. So why don't you just send me the money? And they were like, sure, whatever. 2,500 should cover it. And then, see, I failed to mention my friend, my Super Mario looking friend, Gene Huff, he also has to come along for security reasons. So, end of the story is they wired him 5,000 smackaroonies and he just kept it and never showed up.
そうですね。早速伺いたいんですけど、ラザーがさ、なんでこう日本に来られなくなったのかというあたりを。
She's asking, can you tell us the reason why you can come over to Japan to show up in our studio?
Well, Gene Huff and I had received
ジーン・ハフと私のところに、日本に行けば
Just eternal scammer, one-track mind. He's got that hustler mindset. Grindset, sorry. You know, I would actually really love Bob if it wasn't for that whole Janelle Renee Sturgill thing. It's going to be coming up in a few minutes. Oh, and obviously there was also that whole part where he ripped off his adoptive parents with a loan that he... Oh shit, sorry, that's actually from the next section. Never mind. So somehow through the decades, journalists have been hounding the poor little guy to do just one more interview, you know? Even though he clearly didn't want to. So we got this red shirt interview.
That occurred, and eventually I just wound up not going there.
70227.
Hello? I'm in the middle of an interview. Bye.
We've got another red shirt interview, except he looks younger in this one. I think he started moisturizing or something. So now you're probably wondering, is this the typical Bob Lazar thing where after hundreds of times saying, I hate doing interviews, all of a sudden he comes out with, I love the attention. Oh, how I need people's attention. I love being the center of the conversation. I love to be the star. Well, the thing is, no, he has been very consistent. He hates doing interviews. Remember back in '89?
Lazar says he has no intention of going on any UFO lecture circuit. He's not looking to do any additional interviews.
Well, he certainly kept that up.
Lazar has remained silent for 30 years until now.
Okay. Joke's done, right? You get it. The guy says he doesn't like doing interviews, and then he does 90 of them, and he's still actively doing interviews. Which, by the way, Bob, you've done so many interviews. What would be so terrible about just doing one more interview, except with me this time? What you got to lose? And now you're probably wondering, but do you have enough clips of his interviews that you could make an impromptu fashion show right here? Well, that would be a very strange question, but the answer is yes, I can. In fact, I want you to vote in the comment section here which one of these Bob Lazar fits is your favorite. So we got the sensitive young man with the white turtleneck. It actually looks really good, I'm going to have to admit that. Second is the CSI Miami. Going for a harder look, you know, badass Bob after all. The brothel guy? Yes, totally. You're going to be hearing about that in like 3 minutes. Now, for the third option, we've got the smooth operator, or also the Russian owner of a brothel. Black blazer, black shirt, for when you want to look really smart and professional and also a bit dangerous. And finally, the skinny jeans. A lot of people don't know this, mostly because the US government erased all this data, but Bob invented the skinny jeans. So vote now in the comments, and the person that votes correctly will win a UFO, I guess. So I thought I was almost done here, and I'm checking his Instagram, and oh, you're not gonna believe it. Once again, a group of mean-spirited documentary makers, from Italy this time, they have strong-armed poor little Bob into making yet another documentary.
In December of 1988, I was hired as a senior staff physicist by a U.S. defense contractor called EG&G Special Projects.
Haven't they gotten the message? You know, he hates doing interviews after 36 years. 36 years of torment. Leave the guy alone. Now, in case you're wondering, is there a website where I could read the same old story again? Perhaps one called boblazar.com? Well, you're in luck. And you see, I really had the idea that Bob Lazar himself made this website, right? Would make sense. So I looked this up on the Wayback Machine, and actually it turns out it was made by a guy called John Farhat. Now, check it out. So what you really want to know right now is that just a fan, or is there like some sort of professional relationship between the two? And oh, you're never gonna believe this. So it turns out in January 2015, Farhat and Lazar launched a Kickstarter. And they were asking for the princely sum of $1,100,000 to make a documentary just telling us the same old story again. It wasn't particularly successful. They got $284 from 8 backers, so they just canceled it. Which is really sad, because we were finally going to get the truth about his story. But you people just didn't pitch in enough money. This is all your fault. If you still have some money to burn, you can get some very good paintings made by John Farhat, dedicated to his dear friend Bob Lazar. And he's currently selling that one for 1.7 Ethereum. Now, I have no idea how much that is. It turns out it's $2,500. So if you're really dumb and have a lot of money to burn, you can just buy this thing. All right, so after all this, I think the conclusion is rather simple. This is just another thing he's lying about. Claims to hate doing interviews, does 90 interviews. And the thing is, I get it. I understand saying, I don't want to be a celebrity, leave me alone. But who doesn't like money?
What really annoys me are the people that think, you know, you guys just came up with the story to make a bunch of money or get a bunch of, you know, attention. And
that's a good point. So please explain that. You've
first
never
of all,
made any
I don't
money
get
off of this.
any money out of this at all. And I didn't even let you guys buy plane tickets for me to come out here or anything. I mean,
see, it's settled. He doesn't make any money out of this. So we can only conclude, if he doesn't have any monetary interest in lying about this, it must be that he's telling the truth, right?
anytime, like when Jeremy previewed, I guess, the movie up in Michigan, I mean, it brought in like a couple $1,000s. I made sure that $2,000 went to science programs at the local high schools there.
It's like dirty money. He doesn't want to touch it.
I don't take any money from this stuff.
See, it's like dirty money to him. He decided to donate it all to scientist kids or something, which is great because then you'll want to do this interview with me, right? $5,000 for scientist kids? I'm down. Now, if you're wondering, why are you so sure that Bob Lazar is going to see this video at all? Oh, that's because I'm kind of a lunatic. Over the next 12 weeks, I'm going to send 12 letters to his company, United Nuclear. This is not doxing. I got that right on Google. And I'm going to send him 12 letters asking him to see this little video. So he will. So yeah, he's going to hear about this. And the best way of putting a stop to this is just to agree to that 60-minute interview. After all, a man that tells the truth needs fear no scrutiny, right? So again, he's very clear about this. I don't make any money whatsoever here. But the thing is, by now we've learned he was selling that Lazar tapes and blah, 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 government Bible thing. And that was going for 30 smackaroonies. Now, this is from the early 90s. Like, in today's money, that would be $70, which is a pretty nice profit margin, by the way. It's like an Escobar level of profit. Just, buy a bunch of wholesale blank tapes, copy your shitty documentary over them, $70 a pop. I mean, that's money, right? And how could we forget? Remember that whole embarrassing thing where he knew the size of the UFOs because he sold the toy? Jesus Christ. Well, anyway, yeah, I imagine he got some money out of that, right? Some royalties or whatever. All right, but that was in the mid-90s. Maybe he's changed, Maybe he doesn't want to make money anymore. See, the problem is 36 years later, he's still selling a bunch of stuff on his company's website. Mugs, posters, t-shirts, your basic uninspiring, insipid YouTuber merch. Although, as we're about to find out, that's not the worst thing he ever sold on that website, believe me. As you see, the world keeps changing, but Bob, he's always on top of things. He always knows what to do. If you go into his Instagram right now, you can buy a signed poster for his new documentary. And you know what it says here? Limited edition. You know what that means, right? It means more expensive for you. Generally, his entire Instagram is just him hawking his wares. And then, of course, he publishes biography. I would imagine he made some money out of that, right? By the way, Bob, I bought this for Kindle for $7, and as far as I'm concerned, you owe me $7, dude. Now, if you're wondering, does he also directly contradict himself in this book? No, he was disciplined enough, or his editor was. And now, let's go for the trifecta.
Because I have better things to do than come up with this. I'm not interested in doing this. I don't like being in the public eye. I don't got money for doing this. And quite frankly, I could make up a better lie, but I have no motivation to lie.
All right, the first thing is a lie. We've proven this. You love doing interviews. Anybody can just go on YouTube, type Bob Lazar, and you will see like 90 interviews, so you're lying about that. Now, the second part.
I don't got money for doing this.
He doesn't get money out of this. Well, that's what I'm proving right now. That's also a lie. And now the third part. Let's hear it again.
And quite frankly, I could make up a better lie, but I have no motivation to lie.
Yeah, kinda. I do agree with this one. See, the problem itself wasn't the lie. The problem was just his laziness. Because, you should have just written one solid, cohesive script, kept it under your bed so you could read it every time before an interview, and then you wouldn't have contradicted yourself 30 times, Then you wouldn't be coming across like a total dumbass. Oh, wait, but what's this I heard? A script? You did not sell the rights to your story to a Hollywood studio. No, he did. He sold it to 3 Hollywood studios. Seriously, let's start. Here we have this article from Variety, 93. He sold it to New Line Cinema. You see, that wasn't all. As you can hear on this radio interview, Coast to Coast AM.
So now, what about this? Okay, so what about this new company, Blue Book, that's got it now? What's the promise?
Well, supposedly, and from everything so far that I've heard, sounds like they're going to follow an actual account of the events that happened.
Of your story.
Yeah, which is great.
Oh, so now it's Blue Book. Now it's not New Line Cinema anymore. You sold this twice. Interesting. Sounds like a guy who really didn't want any money and who also hates talking about his story. But wait, there's more.
Well, this is the third try. Initially, Columbia Pictures wanted to do a movie some years back, and they hired a writer and spent somewhere around $400,000 to pay this guy to write the story.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, that's a tremendous amount of money.
And now a third time. So you sold the rights to your story 3 times because you hate attention? Because you don't want money? Dude, seriously? Now, in a way, we got lucky, because imagine this guy, huge mid-90s Hollywood blockbuster based on his story. Who knows how many journalists would still be hounding him, so in a way he got lucky, I would say. And finally, Hollywood decided that his story was just embarrassing as hell, full of plot holes, so they decided to go for a more realistic movie, the one where aliens were defeated by uploading a computer virus through a USB stick. So we can already conclude this is a man that was not interested in making money out of this, which is surprising because A, who doesn't like money? And B, he was also really bad with money. See, Bob Lazar was flat broke, so much so that he declared bankruptcy in 1986. These are all from otherhand.org. Thank you once again, Tom Mahood, for all this research. Did you spot those two? Yep, it's as bad as it sounds. He took on sizable loans from his adoptive parents, and then he declared bankruptcy and simply didn't pay them back. Yeah. The more you look into this Bob Lazar guy, it's insane. I mean, Bob, how should I think of you? Seriously, tell me. Because right now, when I hear stuff like this, words like dishonest or, natural-born swindler sort of pop into my mind. And, deeply morally corrupt is another good one, But if you think all of this is bad enough, wait until the last chapter, right? Before that, my penultimate question is going to be a bit of a sensitive one, which is, respectfully, why didn't the US government simply take you out? Now, before we get to the list of famous whistleblowers and how the US government punished them, first I would like to mention this one, because you got to get your timeline straight for this one, right? A lot of Lazar researchers get this one wrong. So, if the story had been, a guy goes on television, informs everybody the US government holds a bunch of UFOs, next day he's found, a couple of additional holes in his head, that would have been a huge mistake, right? Because that would have made it pretty obvious that the guy was in fact telling the truth. But you see, this is the part that a lot of people get wrong, right? They had the chance to take him out way before he had ever been on television, right? So check this out. I'm talking, of course, about the UFO test flights. Because you see, Bob, while still actively employed at the UFO chop shop, he decided to take his friends to film those UFO test flights that they would do on Wednesdays. And on the 3rd time, they got caught.
On the way home, it's like, hey, we got away with it. We should try it again the next test flight day. So this became a thing to do. And I think it was on the 3rd time that we got caught. I mean, we started becoming a little careless. I think we took a motorhome out there. And, it was like the stupidest thing you could possibly imagine.
Started tailgating.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And
again, you're in your 20s.
Yeah.
So you got caught with a bunch of your friends filming these super secret UFO test flights. And then I suppose they checked your ID. They saw that you were actually working there. And what happened? I mean, you would expect something like, middle of the night, middle of the Nevada desert. Sometimes people disappear. But no, they didn't do that. They did something far worse to him.
So when they catch you and they bring you in, then what happens?
Well, I went in for debriefing. The following day, I went to Indian Springs Air Force Base, which is kind of a defunct base that they used to use at the nuclear test site. And this is when they brought out the transcript of the phone call with my wife.
Because personally, I was thinking more like, pew pew, shallow grave in the middle of the desert, but no.
But you have to have a stable home life, too. Well, she started having an affair with a flight instructor.
They showed him that his wife was having an affair, which is equally as hurtful, I suppose. Mr. Lazar, I do apologize. I thought generally conspiracy theorists are of the opinion that when the government catches a whistleblower, it's straight into the wood chipper. But in this case, they went like, your wife is having an affair, which is equally as hurtful, I guess. But I do want to make a little correction here, because apparently he was there with 5 people, and 5 people going missing the same day, that's going to raise a lot of questions. And that is why CIA assassination teams sometimes have to get creative. Like, think about this one. They were sleeping in an RV. You know how cold it gets in the desert? Maybe they had a propane burner or something. And you know what the deal with hydrocarbons is, right? So if you have enough oxygen coming in, then you're going to get carbon dioxide, right? Which is not terrible. The problem is, if you don't have enough oxygen coming in, then you're in a carbon monoxide situation, which is much worse. Now you're probably wondering, that is a very random example you just came up with. Bob knows. Bob knows exactly why I'm mentioning carbon monoxide. But let's move on. I'm sure you're very anxious to see this UFO test flight that they filmed, and here it is in all its glory.
This home videotape was recorded during one of the trips to the Groom Mountains.
No way. Did you see that move it did?
No, I didn't.
It went like it went boom, boom. Wow, look how bright it's getting.
Look at it now.
Dang bright.
Not bright enough for me to get the son of a bitch.
Here, hold on, right here. Are you there?
No.
It is bright right now.
Admittedly, the tape proves very little by itself because with the distance and darkness, there are no reference points other than the alleged flying disc.
Do you notice the date? 29th of March. This is way before his first interview, so nobody had ever heard of the guy. Oh, and another thing. What exactly am I seeing here? No, seriously. What am I seeing here? There seems to be a yellow light. I suppose that's a UFO. And the thing about that is, you explained how there was this corona discharge, but after either 4 or 30 feet, who cares, it dissipated. And this is clearly hundreds of feet up in the air. So what am I seeing here, Bob? Now, it's amazing. After 30 years of doing interviews, nobody's ever asked him this. Why am I seeing a yellow light up there? You gave us very detailed diagrams of the UFOs, and you never mentioned how the aliens had installed a bunch of floodlights on them. Which, again, traveling at the speed of time, do you even need a headlight? But besides that, oh, maybe it was the Air Force that added all that stuff. And then my question will be, why? They put some floodlights on the UFO so it could be easier to spot by random people driving around Nevada. Bob, seriously, 4-hour interview, you better have a damn good explanation, because I'm just not getting it right now. And if you're wondering what you're seeing right here, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I don't know what a proton beam is, but it's essentially this. Stop the video if you want to read it. But besides all that, the point I actually wanted to make is it's really weird how the guy never had any legal problems from all of this. Now, if we were just to make a very, very quick comparison, now here's a list of other people that leaked secrets. And I want to start with Edward Snowden. He is a guy that worked at the NSA. He was actually able to prove that he worked there because he sent hundreds of thousands of documents to the major newspapers of the world. Essentially what he proved is every single telecommunication you've ever made has been intercepted, recorded, and stored by the US government. And because he knew he was going to get many, many decades in federal prison for that, he fled to Russia, which was, I believe, 13 years ago. Okay, here we have another one, Reality Winner. Seems like I'm making up the name. I'm not. She worked for the US Air Force and the NSA. And she leaked a bunch of official documents about Russian efforts to hack US voting software. She sent them to a newspaper called The Intercept. And she got 5 years in jail for that. I would have given her a medal, but whatever. And then we also have Chelsea Manning, former US Army intelligence analyst, leaked hundreds of thousands of classified documents to WikiLeaks in 2010 while stationed in Iraq. Sentenced to 35 years in prison, which is bad. The sentence was luckily commuted after 7 years. And when I say WikiLeaks, I'm of course talking about Julian Assange. So if I just have a couple of seconds to summarize it, he was sharing secrets of the US government, particularly State Department cables that the Russian government had hacked and sent him. And then, he posted it all on WikiLeaks. Then he realized he would do a couple of decades for that, so he ran into the Ecuadorian embassy in London to seek asylum. So at some point he just realized the sooner my first day in jail comes, the sooner my last day in jail will be. So he surrendered to the authorities. And then there's Gary Webb. I'm sure you've heard of him. He proved that the CIA was financing these guerrillas in Nicaragua, Contra Sandinistas, by making a couple of I can't really pronounce that word on YouTube, but you know what I mean. Central America. And finally, we have the Rosenbergs. They got caught selling secrets on how to make a nuke to the Soviet Union, and they were executed. Yeah, both of them, husband and wife. I think even together. So you will forgive me for this, Bob, but in comparison to these people, it seems like you never really got in trouble for this. And it's really weird. I mean, Lord knows they had a bunch of chances to do you in, right? The first one is when they caught you filming these test flights in the middle of the desert. They decided to be lenient that time. Then there was also the time that you got caught installing hidden cameras at a brothel. Yes, this is absolutely real. That could have been it. Sentenced to 12 months, and then some lifer just takes you out in the chow line. But that also didn't happen. He just got some community service. So they had a bunch of chances. But somehow nothing ever happened to good old Bob. In fact, if you believe his friend Jeremy Corbell.
First of all, what proves he's a scientist is United Nuclear just got a contract with the Naval Academy to basically take... No, hold on, let me tell you this. He has contracts with every agency. He's doing things that would blow your mind.
So what we got here is Schrödinger's Bob. On one side, he's still being hounded relentlessly by the US government. And on the other hand, he has contracts with every agency. And that apparently includes Raytheon weapon systems. Yeah. And finally, we have come to the last question, Bob. What can you tell us about Janelle Renee Sturzel? And this time, Bob, please just tell the truth. I know, just for once in your life, this doesn't have anything to do with that UFO shit. Just tell us the truth, please. Now, before we get to her, there's been a number of women that have been quite important in Bob's life. Why not talk about them a little bit? And I'm warning you, it's about to get really weird. All right, so his first marriage, he was married to Carol Nadine Strong on the 27th of July, 1980. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Even nerds deserve love. Now, his wife was 13 years older than him, but, that's not illegal, so nothing strange, right? Now, one of the difficulties you're going to have while researching her is she went by a lot of names. So she was born Carol Nadine Strong, then she became Carol Nadine Escher, and then finally Carol Nadine Esslinger. So you might think, well, maybe she just got married a bunch of times and took on the husband's last name. But no, not really. As you can see in the marriage certificate, it was her first wedding. Now, I believe that the reason she changed her name so much is because she was a felon that had been convicted of second-degree homicide. Yeah, just like it sounds. So it's going to get a little dark here in the extended Bob universe. You're going to see me reading off the screen a lot because I don't want to get a single fact wrong. This is very serious stuff. So on the 12th of June, 1974, Dennis Pissarro was killed in his home, right? He was described as a Hells Angels associate. I don't know if that means prospect or fence or something, but yeah. A few weeks before, he had an argument with Victoria O'Brien. That was the wife of this particularly unfriendly-looking Hells Angel, Gary Louis Burkett, street name Lurch. All right. And yeah, so Bob's first wife, Lurch, and his wife, they went into the guy's house. What they didn't know is that there was another person there, Harold Eugene Day. So Carol's job was to hold Harold at gunpoint in another room while they went to town on Dennis. Because from the reports and from the articles I've read, they forced him to inject himself with battery acid. I don't know if that's like a Hells Angels thing, but yeah. And then they started stabbing him. And then finally started shooting him. So at that point, that Harold guy probably assumed, what am I here, the victim, wrong place, wrong time. So apparently he threw a wall plaque at Carol, ran out of the house to a neighbor's house, right? I know this seems only like tangentially related to Bob's empire of lies, but as you will soon see, it's actually really important to include this in the video. I do want to take a minute to remember this young man. Here we have Dennis Dominic Pissarro, with his newborn baby, Gina, wife Barbara, and his brother Michael Dino in the back end. He was only 24 years old. Don't hang out with Hells Angels, would be my advice. Now, if you want some closure, they caught Carol a couple of days later, somewhere in Northern California. They caught the couple 8 months later in Alaska, because back in the day, it would be as simple as just skipping town, So he was sentenced to 10 to 20 years. She was sentenced to life in prison, which is kind of unusual, but I guess she did the shooting, and I guess the judge just understood that she was the instigator of it all. Here we can see him in Folsom Prison with some of those Aryan Brotherhood guys. And despite having been sentenced to 10 or 20 years, he was out in 9. Here we have this arrest report from 85. If you want to know what ultimately ended up happening, he croaked in 2012, I believe, of cancer. So anyway, back to Bob, right? Carol was also sentenced for, in her case, second-degree homicide. I don't know how many years she got. All I can tell you is this was in 75 that she got sentenced, and by 1980 she was already out to meet her, sweet old Bobby. So we can already conclude Bobby's sweetheart, she had a bit of a wild life, probably because she was addicted to a number of substances. Don't know if I can really give you the name, but think of this one, right? And then they lived happily ever after. Kind of. I mean, in a way, Bob did save her from her dark past, so what they did, and as you would expect, they bought a brothel. Yes, this is real. Legal brothel in Nevada called the Honeysuckle Ranch. This is not a rumor, right? I mean, Bob tells us this in his autobiography. He claims they were clearing $100,000 a month, which is quite a lot of money, I suppose. Okay, I don't really want to get into this part, but there are some rumors that it's not true. So there's this brothel historian, Ian McKell Collins. He's written a bunch of books about brothels in Nevada, and he claims he never heard of no Honeysuckle Ranch. I was able to find this pic, Mo Honey for your money. Bob, you should have been a poet instead. Now, as you can see, Lazar Enterprises, but then again, you can fake that. I mean, you could technically make a shirt in 2025 that says 1985, so I don't know. Honestly, I don't particularly care. I don't know what's morally worse, to run a brothel or to lie and pretend that you ran a brothel. I don't really care. Let's move on.
He's not a shrinking violet. Bob can defend himself. He's a jet car guy, the brothel guy, the shotgun guy. He's lived a wild life.
Yeah, he's the brothel guy. Just the typical story of you start out running a brothel and then the government hires you to retro-engineer UFOs. A tale as old as time. Anyway, enough about Carol for now. We have some further good news, some heartwarming news. Bobby got married again. In fact, if you want to see this one, Tracy Ann Merck, she's the one that was there when George Knapp did the first interview. You can see her right here. And once again, I love 80s girls. So, good news, he got married again, and this was exactly on the 19th of April, 1986. And again, there's nothing weird about this. I mean, divorce is a sad thing, but it happens, so I guess he got divorced and then he married. And no, you see, that's kind of the thing here. Let me hold that for a second. Now, on the off chance you're wondering, was this one also a felon? Yes. What are the chances? 2 out of 2. Pretty amazing stuff. Now, her story is not as wild as Carol's. She participated in what can only be described as the lamest bank heist of all times. So, December of 1985, she was working as a teller at the Los Alamos National Bank. Another teller, a colleague of hers, approached her with a plan. So, apparently, there's this guy in town. He's got a lot of money, but he's not quite there anymore. What say we forge a couple of checks, we have friends bring them in, and then we split the money. She immediately agreed to that, she loved the idea, and they did so for about 10 days. And then it turned out that colleague that told her about this plan, he was working undercover for the bank. Now, my first thought is, isn't this an entrapment? But no, I looked it up, because it wasn't a cop that suggested that she committed a crime. It's not entrapment. Anyway, whatever. Again, it lasted for about 10 days. I can't imagine she made too much money out of it, and now she's going to be a felon for the rest of her life. But anyway, back to happier times, as I said. 19th of April, 1986, Bob Lazar married Tracy Ann Merck. And here's the really weird thing, and this is kind of insane. He was technically still married to Carol. Because you see, people have been researching this for decades. I'm talking about talented people like Tom Mahood of Other Hand and the guy that runs the Papoose Lake website. Extremely diligent researchers. They've been looking up everything that you possibly can about this guy, and there were no divorce proceedings. They never found a divorce filing. So, to be clear, Bob married Tracy while he was still married to Carol, which I find strange, right? I mean, I've heard of polygamy in Utah, but Nevada? I don't know. Then again, there's no laws in Nevada, so who cares? And here is where it gets kind of sad. 2 days after his second marriage, on the 21st of April 1986, Carol committed that word that I cannot pronounce on YouTube. Let's say Sierra Uniform India followed by side. You know what I mean. Now, what can I say? It's always so strange with Bob. Every single step of the way, you just find these insane stories that honestly make me think this is not a particularly good, like morally upstanding citizen. But yeah, so the story is Carol was found in the garage of her house with the engine running. Yes, that would be the jet-powered Honda, that Honda that Bob Lazar installed that jet on, which was supposedly instrumental in him getting the job at the UFO thing through Edward Teller and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, carbon monoxide poisoning. Now you probably know why I mentioned it earlier. And it was Bob that found her and immediately contacted the authorities. As you can see here, these are all official reports. A lot of first responders arrived at the house. Now, I want to choose my words very carefully for this, okay? I am in no way whatsoever suggesting that Bob had anything to do with it, okay? The furthest I could legally go is to say something like, I don't know, man, maybe finding out her husband had married another woman, without even having the decency of getting a divorce first. I don't know, maybe that plunged her into a deep depression. I have no idea. I repeat, I'm not saying Bob Lazar had anything to do with it. In fact, they did find a note, an S note, that stated, "I did this by myself." I'm not an expert on these types of notes, but isn't this... Again, I'm not saying nothing. Now, here's how Bob explained it in his autobiography, page 24. Carol had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer just a few months before, and she chose not to tell him. Okay? She kept it a secret. And, this is also surprising because all these first responders, they obviously searched the entire house, as they always do in these cases. And, I would think if you get diagnosed with cancer, you're going to end up with a stack of documents about yay high from the different test results, from your hospital, from the doctor, you know what I mean. They didn't find a single piece of paper. So, yeah, I don't really know what to make of this. You gotta admit, there's something fishy about it. Especially if I tell you, 2 days later, 2 days after Carol's untimely passing, they moved in together, his new wife Tracy. I suppose they aired out the garage and they moved into the house that Carol had been living there until, 2 days before. 1933 and Greta Street in Las Vegas. And remember how Bob declared bankruptcy in July '86, exactly to the day 2 months after this. And he declared bankruptcy citing loss of business and death of spouse. And then he didn't have any debts anymore. Everything's coming up Millhouse. Yeah, let's try to end this on a more positive note. Then he got married again. And by now it's obligatory. You're asking, was this third woman also a felon? Yes, 3 out of 3. Except in that case, it's a lot easier to explain. He married Tracy again. Why? Well, I suppose because that first marriage of theirs wasn't legal because he was technically still married to somebody else. It might be that, or it might be because she wanted to change her name. They got married this time under the name Jackie Diane Evans. Because back in the day, it really used to be as simple as that, get in trouble with the law, just skip town, change your name, and you'll be good. And then the NSA came around and you can't really do that anymore. They're going to be onto you. Now, I can already see some of those Lazar fans saying, this has absolutely nothing to do with his time working at the whole UFO thing. This proves nothing. And you know what? Let me stop you right there. This may at first seem like some completely useless, irrelevant information, but no, I think this is actually the most important part of everything I've told you today, okay? All those contradictions where he just can't get the story straight, you might say that's all rather circumstantial and not really definitive. This, however, is definitive. Because you see, when you work at any sort of important government program, you're going to need a security clearance, okay? That's just how it goes. I don't make the rules. And these background checks that they do are no joke. I mean, they will have FBI agents going back 30 years to ask people who you went to middle school with just to make a judgment of character. Now, I want to make sure I get this completely correct. So, here's what they would have found in this background check. 1, you married a woman that had done time for second-degree homicide. That's not a good start. Second, this was connected to an organized armed criminal group called the Hells Angels, right? Third thing, you then ran a brothel with her. I don't know, you tell me, are pimps the most trustworthy people in society? I have no idea. I've not met many pimps thus far. I wonder what the guy doing the background check would think, right? The fourth thing is you got married a second time while still being married, blah, blah, blah. The fifth thing is your first wife passed away 2 days after your second marriage in, let's just say, somewhat unclear circumstances, right? And then the sixth thing that FBI agent would have seen is you then declared bankruptcy, leaving debts all over town, including some with your adoptive parents. So I'm just going to put my foot down here and I'm going to say, no, there's absolutely no chance a man with this life would have gotten a security clearance to work in the most important, most secretive government project of all times. It simply wouldn't have happened, okay? It's done. It's over. Honestly, with that sort of a biography, I don't think they would let you be a part-time volunteer firefighter in Gary, Indiana, right? So it's over, okay? No, he did not work on UFOs, and I know this because he would have never gotten a security clearance because of all the scummy stuff he had been up to his entire life. End of the fucking story. And in fact, if you really want to know, after many years researching this guy, I can tell you what the truth about Bob Lazar is. Now, I think this video is long enough. So I'm going to give him a couple of weeks to respond to see if we can set up that interview, which I genuinely want to do. And if in 3 months or so he hasn't responded, then I'll just make the video The Truth About Bob Lazar. I can assure you it's going to be way shorter because there really isn't that much to this story. I mean, this is a story that starts with John Lear's father all the way back in Australia in 1954. But it's quite simple to understand. Bob wanted to make a bunch of money, and he did. And we have finally reached the end of the video. There's just one last thing I want to share with you, because this is the one that I just can't forgive him for, right? Because up to this point, like, it's clear the guy made the whole thing up, right? But the question is, who did he hurt with that, right? It's like he made up some tale to ultimately, get a movie deal, basically. But he didn't specifically hurt anyone with this, right? Up until this exact point, right? Do you remember how Bob is the owner of a company called United Nuclear that sells exotic chemicals? October 2015, Janelle Renee Sturzel is admitted into the ER. She was clearly in a very bad state, and the doctors had absolutely no clue what was going on, right? Hair falling out, this like bluish tint to her skin, extreme pain all over the body. She also had essential tremors, which is a sign of severe nerve damage. And then in late November 2015, she was transferred to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, where after a couple of dozen tests, they finally found what was happening with her, and it was a very rare case of thallium poisoning. So thallium is a chemical element. It does have some legitimate uses, but mostly it's just known by its nickname, the poisoner's poison. Okay, this is one of these substances you don't even have to ingest to get poisoned. No, skin contact is enough, right? So really terrible. And unfortunately, in December 2015, after some months of excruciating pain, you really can't even imagine something like that. It's essentially your body's disintegrating, every single cell dying. It's, you really wouldn't wish it on anyone. And yes, Janelle Renee Sturzel ended up passing away in exactly on the 22nd of December. Now, you probably have two questions already. The first, I'm afraid, no, can't bring you any closure. They never caught the culprit. Okay, they apparently had somebody that they did investigate, but I guess they just didn't get enough evidence to put the guy in front of a judge. So as for right now, it is still unknown. If by the most random happenstance, somebody watching this video happens to have any info whatsoever, you can contact the Houston Police Department at this number, whether you believe the information is important or not. It's still an open case, right? And the second question you probably have is, what does Bob have to do with this? Well, you get no points for guessing. The murderer bought this thallium on Bob's online shop, United Nuclear. Now, in case you're thinking, all right, I've seen all these screenshots, but I'm still not convinced that Bob is in any way connected to this. Well, if you don't believe me, here's Bob essentially admitting to it.
Standing room only in the building. It was crazy.
Yeah, they had like a forensic truck. They had a bunch of different agents. They gridded off the building. I mean, obviously they're looking for something.
Yeah. Yeah, and what they said, they were looking for some paperwork, an old order from 2 years ago about a customer that, ordered some potentially toxic material, which they could have called for, but this was certainly way over the top.
I want to be as clear as I can possibly be. You sold a poison, somebody bought that poison and used it to poison somebody, forgive the repetition. One would normally think, oh, he probably feels really terrible about it, because let's be absolutely clear, Bob Lazar, he is the sort of person that will know exactly what you can do with thallium, all right? Maybe you ask some random coworker and they wouldn't know. Bob Lazar does have some knowledge of chemistry and physics, and I've never doubted that. So he knew what he was doing. I'm not saying he's directly responsible, but let me just make a silly little comparison, right? So somebody buys a knife at a supermarket. 6 months later, he uses that knife to stab somebody. Would I send the cashier of that supermarket to jail? Well, no. This case is it's a bit different. It's a little more direct. I mean, you're the owner of a company. You sold an extremely toxic substance, knowing that it's extremely toxic, and somebody used that to poison somebody. I mean, I do think you have some responsibility, right? And now, what did Bob do at this point, right? Did he feel any guilt, any remorse or something? No, he did what you would expect a sociopath to do, which is he saw this as a great opportunity to bolster the credibility of his bullshit tales by saying, hey guys, I don't want to alarm you, but the FBI just raided me. And I think they're still looking for some of that element 115. Well, no, they weren't. They were looking for a sales receipt. See, pretty normal stuff. They wanted a name, the shipping address, they wanted to see the credit card that had been used to buy that poison. Again, very regular stuff that you would expect the cops to do in a case like this. And this was, in fact, included in that garbage Corbell documentary. Again, just as a... in fact, the first 15 minutes are about this. I mean, how else do you explain this? The FBI, as part of a murder investigation, they showed up at your warehouse and they were looking for a sales receipt. And then you decided to include that in your garbage documentary with Jeremy Corbell. Dude, I don't know if I'm the only one, but I find that extremely disgusting. Now, as for that raid, yes, that actually happened on Wednesday, 19th of July, 2017. All right, here you can see the FBI. Here's the official report. Now, if you think this was some sort of a heavy raid with helicopters and battering rams, no, they called them up. Hey, are you currently at your company? Yes. We're just gonna drop by because we're looking for some information about a sale you made, right? And he in fact agreed to let them go through his computers and stuff without even a warrant. He didn't even ask to look at it because it was a rather routine police action in this sense. And now, of course, I don't know if this was Bob's idea or Jeremy's idea, but to include this doesn't have anything to do with your UFO tale. Hey, what else is there to say? You know, I think you're an irredeemable scumbag, you know. You really got to be the son of the 1,000 whores of Babylon to take something like this and say, maybe we could include this in my documentary and say, oh, I think they were looking for element 115. First of all, let's be clear, you admitted that you had stolen some of it all the way back in the 90s, and they waited till 2017 to raid you. No, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. You really got to be a to believe something like that. That is the first part. The second, as you can see, they only raided his company's warehouse and not his home. So I'm pretty sure if they were looking for element 115, they would have also gone to your home. Listen, there's absolutely no excusing this. Now, in typical embarrassing Bob Lazar fashion, as you can see here, these are the first couple of minutes of the video of the Corbell documentary. And well, see, Corbell was actually surprisingly smart. He did change the date on his phone, but Bob wasn't. So again, this was something that happened on the 19th of July, 2017, which was a Wednesday. And somehow Bob's messages are coming from the 25th of August at 8 p.m. This raid happened in the morning, and it certainly didn't happen end of August. Again, very lame, very shitty reenactment. I'm not complaining about that. I'm just complaining I think it takes a sociopath to look at the situation and say, okay, so this innocent 31-year-old woman got murdered, something they bought on my website, but now that I've been raided, I can use that to bolster my credibility. Go fuck yourself, Bob. Seriously. Again, up to this point, it was like the man is a pathological liar, but he's never hurt no one. Bob, we're done here, okay? You're a scumbag. How many more obvious facts do you need? His entire story is a lie. He worked at Los Alamos National Labs for about 4 or 5 months. He had the most boring job there. All he would do is, they have these radiation detectors and, I had no basic maintenance on that. He worked there for a couple of months. That is true. Did he work at Area 51? No, not at all. And let's be clear, his entire life has been one of deceit, of lying, of scamming, of stealing. This is a guy that was caught installing hidden cameras in an illegal brothel in Nevada, in Las Vegas. One of the things about cameras, security cameras, is you want them to be as obvious as possible so people know that they're there. They usually make you even have a huge sign so people know that they better be on their best behavior. Now, a security camera that is hidden, that very much defeats the whole point. So honestly, I think you were just looking to extort some Johns. Can I prove this? I cannot, so whatever. If after all of these facts that I've given you, his constant contradictions, the fact that he is a deeply morally corrupt person, if after all of this you're still like, well, I don't know, maybe Bob is telling the truth, then I cannot possibly help you. Good night and good luck. Oh, and Bobby, about that interview, call me.